Hey everybody, Steve Ritter here. So I was talking with the ravishing Mrs. Ritter this morning. We were talking a little bit about getting older, and I think there's a point in your life, when you're 20, you just don't think about it at all. You think you're immortal, I guess. And there's a point, and I'm there, I guess, when you're middle age, you start kind of going, I guess it's when you start like getting sore so much, or like I get up out of bed and I'm achy. But anyway, you get a sense of your mortality that you can kind of look down the road and see, this road does end sometime. And when is that point when you start teaching your children that? And that's we were talking about that, and it just reminded me of a story about Bella. Tell, and we laugh about this all the time. She always rolls her eyes, and when I tell this story, but it's one of my favorites. We were living in Washington at the time. I was stationed at McCord Air Force Base. Anyway, we were up there, and I forget why I was home at the time. Anyway, she wanted a pet of some kind, and we weren't ready to get a dog yet. So we said, well, we'll get her a fish, and we had a little fish bowl, and we put some colored rocks in the bottom of it, and we got her a little goldfish from the Walmart, I guess, or something. But I mean, they're like, it was like $1 or whatever they cost. I can't remember at the time, but that pretty little goldfish, and she loved that thing, and she would put little flakes of food in there. Of course, she always would feed it too much, inevitably. So we had to like, no, all it needs is like one or two little flakes, and that's it, for a day or two. But she named the fish Juliet. That was the name she gave it. So Juliet, the goldfish, right? So she loved that thing, and she'd sit and look at it and just admire it. So, but as is the way with most things, Juliet, came to the end of her life. And it just so happens Bella was at school, and I forget why I was at home at the time. I think I had to fly that day or something, so I was home in crew rest. And so I come downstairs, and we get Bella out the door, and I come back in, and I looked at my wife, and I was like, oh, Juliet, she's dead, because she was just floating upside down. And we're like, oh no, oh, well, what do we say? Well, we're like, well, Bella was like 6 at the time, maybe 7, and we weren't ready to have that talk yet with her. So I'm like, well, we got fish from Walmart. What if we found a replacement? So we ran down to Walmart into the little pet section at the time, and they had the goldfish there, and we saw one that looked pretty close, and said, hey, let's see if we can pull this off. So we bought the fish, took it home, put it in the bowl, and dropped it in, and then waited. And then Bella came home, and she walked in, and I'm like, did you feed Juliet yet? And she's like, oh, okay. And she goes and she puts a little flake in, and she's looking at it, and she kind of, but she didn't, I mean, it was close enough. She, didn't notice. She kind of was like, a little something different. She goes, Daddy, I think Juliet's like, her color changed a little bit or something. I'm like, well, sometimes fish, maybe it's like different mood or something, or maybe it was something she ate or something. And so anyway, we were able to dodge that until a couple of weeks later, when Juliet number 2 died and was floating upside down again. We were able to kind of keep it going. We ran to Walmart again, got another one, and this one, though, we couldn't find one that was real close. This one's fins were just a little bit bigger, and it was pretty noticeable. But we're like, well, maybe she's 6, maybe she won't notice. And she came home, and Percy, she goes, Daddy, Juliet's fins grew. And I'm like, well, sometimes, in the bowl, maybe the animals adapt, and maybe her fin grew out a little bit. Or she goes, But while I was at school, and I'm like, well, maybe I didn't lie. I used a lot of maybes. Well, it could, maybe, possibly, this could have happened. It could have, I guess, technically. And so we kept that going for probably 2 months or 3 months. I mean, the goldfish. I don't know if they. I think the goldfish were to feed other fish or something. They were not very hardy fish, and they didn't last very long. But they kept dying. And finally, we got to Juliet number 6 or 7, and we're like, the color was different, fins different, and finally we're like, we need to just talk with her about this, and so finally she came home, and we're like, Bella, uh, and we actually left the dead Juliet number 7 floating in the bowl, and we're like, Bella, Juliet died, and she was like, oh, and we had opened up a thing to have a discussion with her. Death is a normal part of life. I mean, it's the end. Julia had a good run, and it was time to, if you'd like to bury her and take her out in the yard, and she's like, yes. And I had a little garden plot out there, and we opened it up. Of course, that I didn't tell her. I mean, that was a side benefit, is that fish, help the plants. But I did talk about that. I was like, well, Juliet will return to the earth, and her body will break down, and it'll help feed us because it's in our little garden, and that's the way of life. And so we kind of, it was even raining a little bit, as it always is at funerals on TV, right? So it was raining a little bit, and I was like, well, Bella, do you want to bury her here, and you want a few minutes by yourself with Julia? And she said yes. So I went inside, and I kind of was looking out the window, looking at her, and I could see it as clear in my mind's eye right now. And I think I have a picture somewhere of it, but I could see it. Just she was in her little pink jacket. She was just kind of standing there. She had her head down, and shoulders kind of slumped a little bit. She sat there for a couple of minutes and saying bye to Juliet. So we didn't tell her till she was probably 5 years later that I'm like, Belia, we went through probably 6 fish before we finally told you that Juliet passed. She's like, well, why didn't you tell me? Well, we were ready to tell you. We just, we needed to figure out how to talk about that kind of thing with you so that you can understand. And but we used it to kind of teach a lesson and say, well, Bella, you really should, if anything teaches that you should value every day with those you love, and treasure and cherish every day, because you never can tell when somebody is gonna pass away, or something you love passes away, or a particular thing that you have, or something might break or whatever. And just go through life and just cherishing the good things that you have, and not take them for granted. And that's a whole different lesson, isn't it? But it's kind of tied into it. So anyway, I was thinking about that today. A little funny story. I thought I'd share that with you. And sorry for the slow mo for the Charleston video I did. I plan to do some more tours like that. There's some really cool places around here. Of course, I'm a history buff, so I like to do some talks about history that went on around here. So hope you enjoyed it. Got another recipe coming up too, that we're gonna do. But and also I found out I will be going to work full time, and I'm gonna be going over to Abu Dhabi, so in the UAE. So I'm looking forward to sharing some videos with you of the culture over there, and what's going on there. Hopefully I won't do it all in slow-mo this time, or maybe I will. All right, anyway. So hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed doing these and sharing these funny stories. It just makes me laugh and smile thinking about it. So until then, it's Colonel signing off. Over and out.